we don't value imitation as much as we should. This imitation, that's cheap learning. But anything that any of us have ever learned, it started with imitation, and it continues to this day.
Hello, and welcome to the Arts of Language podcast with Andrew Pudewa, founder of the Institute for Excellence in Writing, or as many like to say, IEW. My name is Julie Walker, and I'm honored to serve Andrew and IEW as the Chief Marketing Officer. Our goal is to equip teachers and teaching parents with methods and materials which will aid them in training their students to become confident and competent communicators and thinkers.
Well, we are here. We're back. We are here with our panel, and we've got Jessica, who taught. Jessica, why don't you just introduce yourself briefly?
Okay, I'm Jessica Tinney from Modesto, Oklahoma. Range is a little bit varied. I taught at a private Christian school before, and I've taught in a public school before. So,
what grades did you teach, Jessica?
Everything. So,
in the public school, what grade did you teach?
That was kindergarten.
Okay.
Yeah, and then in private school, it was actually a Spanish teacher for K4 through 5th.
Great. Okay. And Jeff?
Oh, well, I'm Jeff Neese. I'm IEW's implementation coach and one of the school's department managers. And then I'm also an educational consultant. I taught high school social studies for almost 10 years, primarily all to freshmen. And that is my background, and that was in a public school setting.
In Broken Arrow. Which is in the Tulsa area. So, Jennifer?
Hi, Jennifer Mauser. I am here from St. Augustine, Florida, and I have taught in classrooms. I've taught in a tutor relationship because I have a private practice where I work with students impacted by learning differences. And my background is actually in home education.
So that's our panel today, and we are going to unpack a little bit more of the 4 deadly errors, but I also have some questions for any of the panelists that want to be brave enough to take them. So how do you want to do this, Jeff?
Hey, you ask away and we'll answer.
Okay. So have any of you experienced and personally are guilty of committing any of the 4 deadly errors?
All 4 of them.
All multiple times, yes.
Do anybody want to speak to any of those that you committed and how this has impacted you?
Well, I can talk about my experience with my students in one of my classes. What Andrew said in the talk that you gave just the previous session was on how you got your lesson plans, right? Mm-hmm. From your student errors that you would find and you'd change a few sentences. And I had a particularly challenging class one year. We were doing medieval history-based writing lessons. It was a high school class, so I was using the advanced editions. And I had students that were really struggling with clausal structure. And so I remember feeling stymied by that because I was trying to use the lesson itself to help teach that. And so what I finally did is I gathered up examples and then I used what I knew of the students. And by making it more engaging, because I was involving the students in their activities and the things that they enjoyed, I got a lot more engagement. And that really helped handle that challenge of just how do I not overcorrect, but how do I move them along in their learning?
Good. So that was the overcorrecting error. Any other errors you want to point out? Jeff, what about you?
Well, guilty of all 4 and probably all 7. I would say that just comes to mind withholding help. Mm-hmm. And teaching high school freshmen, they are very awkward. And so they're kind of, we used to call them just big 8th graders.
Yeah.
And until really second semester, until they are, okay, now you understand kind of how high school works. But withholding help because I didn't want to help too much and I didn't want to give them, an answer or a model to go off of. And I got much better at this as I went on. But early on, if I give them a model, if I show them exactly what it should look like, they're just going to copy that. But now going through really IEW's approach, Andrew's talks and articles of really just no, we need good modeling, and we need students to have a clear idea of what is expected of them. Because when I was in the classroom, I didn't want to play the aha gotcha game. And I think a lot of students are kind of what you talked about. They're trying to be a mind reader, whereas just tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it. But it's also for you, you have to kind of guess what I'm expecting, and I hope you get it right. And if you don't, aha, gotcha. So as I went on each year, providing more modeling and more help was a game changer for sure. And so, it's teaching at a 9th grade level, those students are, what is expected of a 9th grader to be the best they can be. But we are on this very age segregated, grade segregated, conveyor belt type of mentality of, well, you know what, if you don't get it, that's okay. You're probably not studying hard enough. It's on you. We're just going to pass you along to the next. So there's really no progression of skills. It's just, we have to keep passing them along. And so I will say too, it's discouraging because we even have some school districts that their motto is 100% graduation. So when you have that, it's very much, well, now we have to live up to that. So if we say our goal is 100% graduation, we've seen it firsthand. This kid is not doing so well, but we're just going to keep passing them along to kind of meet our motto.
I'd like to comment on something you mentioned, which was, well, if I show that to them, they'll just copy it. And that does sound bad. But if we back up just a little bit, we don't value imitation as much as we should. I think everyone's, okay, that's a kindergarten, 1st grade. Yeah, they monkey see, monkey do. But by the time they're 9, we've got to get them thinking independently. We've got to build critical thinking. This imitation, that's cheap learning. But anything that any of us have ever learned, it started with imitation. And it continues to this day. Even old people, if you're thinking, how do I get better at something? You watch people who are better and you try to do stuff that they do. That's normal. So I would love to see kind of a re-norming of imitation as a fundamental part of lessons and classroom practice at all grade levels. I come from a music background. It's all imitation. Everything you teach in music, teaching a kid how to play the violin, you're saying, do it this way. And then after years, okay, now try that on your own. But you just don't go, here, pick up a violin and fool around with it. You get 0. So I think that, my thought is, show it to them. And if the best they can do is just copy it, that's learning. And if they could do it without copying it, they would. And actually, it's always somewhere in between. We're always copying something, whether we like it or not, whether it was provided for us or not. And we're always on the edge of experimenting. And so if we think of that as kind of an okay place to hang out, even with 9th graders. The other thing came to my mind was so many schools do have this kind of segregated approach where 9th grade, this is the curriculum. 10th grade, this is the curriculum. And there's not necessarily a lot of overlap in a way that provides them with a review. This is one of the super powerful things. If you can get structure and style going for 3 or 4 or 5 years, then they will leave that experience having a good, solid foundation, knowing what models and structures are, knowing what style is, having some techniques under their belt. They're not going to follow the checklist forever, but we don't want them to. We want them to gain the skills. And so building that consistency in, grade after grade after grade, and then that solves the problem of kids forgetting everything over the summer. I've taught kids, when we were making the videos here, I taught the kids, and then we came back after 20 weeks or something because we had a pretty long break. And I was astounded at the things they did not remember. We did this. You all did this. We all knew this. How is it you do not know it? So I have learned over time to not be astounded and to understand that part of a good curriculum is going to be embedded. And I wouldn't even use the term review because that has a slightly negative connotation. It's just embedded repetition, modeling, practice, all the things that work, and doing it kind of in the same way with different stories and articles and all that. But doing that for years, that is a huge gift.
Yep.
Well, and to piggyback off of one thing that you said about imitation, think about the benefit of imitation and exposure for students to be able to see so many different styles. And I mean, you can't blame a student for what they don't know.
Right.
And if you say, look, this is an example, you can do it this way. And even if it's great literature, if it's a history composition, whatever the case may be, for them to be able to see that, it gives them so many ideas. And I love that what you talk about is what we do with IEW is, we kind of think of their brain as a toolbox or an inventory, and we're just pouring these tools in year after year, week after week, where they can pull these out and use them. And so giving them all these different opportunities for imitation and seeing what that looks like and just exposure is, it's a beautiful thing. And for a teacher to withhold that and to say, well, now you have to kind of read my mind, and good luck, especially if they get a pretty, well, for one, no rubric or a very vague rubric. They don't know what to do or how to do it. So I love the whole thing of imitation is such a beautiful thing.
One of our questions that one of our attendees submitted was this question of plagiarism. So let me read the question and I'll let any of you answer this. How do you help students avoid accidental plagiarism? Which I love that. It wasn't intentional. They're not trying to be devious. When they first learn to write rough drafts, or maybe after they've learned to write rough drafts many times, avoiding plagiarism. Anyone want to take that one on?
I think the question comes up usually at the beginning when we're in Unit 2 and it's just sentence by sentence and you're moving keywords. You can't really not sound like what you came from. And this is not a goal. This is not a finished product. This is not an end. This is a step in a process. But a lot of times people have that feeling that, all these kids, it's just so similar. Some of these sentences are exactly the same as what we started with. Don't worry, just throw it all away. You're not keeping it anyway. Unit 3, you start to get a little more variety because you're not looking in every sentence for keywords. You put the story in your mind, you pull it out into an outline, and you get more variety. In Unit 4, if you do it right, you're going to have kids choosing different facts. But by then, you've also started to introduce a number of style techniques. And I once had a conversation with Dr. Webster about plagiarism. And he said, well, my system is the solution to that. Because even if you tried to copy from the encyclopedia, you'd still have to put in all the dress-ups and openers and decoration and triple. You wouldn't be able to come up with the same thing. So in a way, the style checklist is a protection against accidental plagiarism.
That's good. Yep.
The other thing I would point out is that if you do have kids who are, they're blessed with a good memory. And that's a blessing. Every kid who has a good memory is thankful for it. But sometimes it comes out like, those 3 words, they came from this sentence. I remember it exactly. I write it down exactly. And that's an indicator that they could probably use a slightly more advanced source text, right? Something a little more challenging to read, slightly longer sentences, vocabulary. But if you're working with a group, you can't necessarily customize source text as easily as you can customize
a checklist.
The checklist. But you can kind of have a couple source texts on the side that you might take to that student. Because the one who's likely to do that is also likely to finish before everybody else. So Webster's idea was, while you're writing, everybody's writing. And if you finished what you're writing, here's another one, right? Or go to the file and pick a source text you want and do this with that. So he always encouraged teachers to have kind of a backup file of source texts. to keep what he called the birdies, right? The ones who take off, to give them another option. And this idea that, oh, that's not fair, I have to write more than someone else. No, I don't think that there's any rule anywhere that says everyone has to do the exact same number of paragraphs or exact same number of assignments or even use the exact same checklist. And so thinking more flexibly, the kids have been brainwashed into an egalitarian mindset. And the thing they're most likely to say, well, that's not fair. Yeah, it's not fair, but it's just.
Well, that goes back
Just right.
to modeling too. Well, it's not fair that I have to go through something 4 times and Jimmy over here only had to do it 2 times. We're all in different areas of learning and growth, and we process differently. Julie and I, we talked about this yesterday. One of my biggest pieces of advice when I go out and I'm training teachers in our methodology is trust the system, because there's this almost unlearning that needs to happen because they have this word in their head. Well, it should look like this. Students should be able to do 5-paragraph essays by, say, we start in September, it's November, there we are. Well, they're moving too fast. And so I actually went out to a school one time, and I mean, they were hammering me. I was like, maybe Andrew should have been here. But why do you all wait till Unit 7 to do 5 paragraphs? That's in usually around February, March-ish. That the school year is almost done. They need to go all the way back here and so they just kept going on and on of, why do you wait so long? So in their mind, it kind of is what you talked about earlier. Good writing is a 5-paragraph essay with very clear, X, Y, and Z, fill in the blank. And so I finally just asked them, I said, okay, I kind of played dumb. Is there like a state standard that you all are trying to meet? Why is there such a heavy emphasis on doing a 5-paragraph essay in, say, October or November? Well, it's what we always done. We've always done that. We always had this one really awesome Thanksgiving project that we do. Okay. And then so we started walking back the skills of each one of those units. And really the reason I'm here is because you're seeing a deficiency in your students' writing.
Right.
And so when we talk about, if we're giving them multiple opportunities for single paragraph or even 3 paragraphs, we're getting them really good at that instead of introducing more. So there's really just this unlearning that needs to happen. But we say, trust the process. And usually they have to get through the whole 9 U's before they go,
I get it.
Okay, now I see what we're doing.
One teacher said to me, so you don't do any real writing until March? And I thought, it's all real writing.
What is that?
The other thing I like to mention is that I think for everyone involved, more frequent, shorter assignments is more effective because, well, number one, what do kids like the most about schoolwork?
Getting it done.
Getting finished at the other end.
If you have more frequent, shorter things, they get to be finished more often. So it's a dopamine thing. The second thing is, if you give a group of kids, okay, here's the 5-paragraph plan, and this is how we do it, and it takes time. It takes a lot of time, especially to do it well. Then you give them feedback, and then you try another one, and that takes a couple of weeks. Your feedback loop is big. Whereas if it's a paragraph, feedback loop, next paragraph, 2 paragraphs, feedback loop, 3 paragraphs. Okay, your feedback loop is tighter, and so you can address the things that need to be addressed more frequently and more efficiently. And so that's why I would encourage. And I'm not opposed to big assignments. I think super essays are great. But even if you're teaching 10th grade, don't jump there with the assumption that everybody should already know everything they need to know to do this. Let's start and build it up. And I've always wanted to go into like a hypothetical teaching competition. 2 cloned groups of kids. They're exactly the same in every way. And you start throwing prompts at them in September and let me start with Unit 1, 2, 3, 4, and work up to Unit 7. And then we give them some objective standardized tests. I will win. I know. It's not possible, but hypothetically, it's interesting to think about.
And I just want to mention a couple resources, Andrew, as you were sharing, and Jeff, this process. Andrew has written an article called Process versus Product. Mm-hmm. And there's also another article, The 4 Deadly Errors we've already talked about, However Imperfectly. Well, Andrews wrote a book called However Imperfectly, Lessons Learned from 30 Years of Teaching and Other Articles. If you are a premium member, you have a coupon to get a free copy of this book. And if you're really nice and ask sweetly, Andrew will even autograph it for you. But those links, we also have those articles available on our website. So Mark, if you could please post those two in particular, Process versus Product.
And there's an article on imitation.
Imitation
would be applicable.
Okay, there you go. 3 articles to post, Mark. Ready, set, go. See if you can, what you can do about posting.
Yeah, that Process versus Product is one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. Anytime when I start getting a little bit of pushback, well, we've always read this.
Yeah. Well, and I love your question, Jeff, because it's so true. Why are you being asked to come in and teach a different way of teaching writing? Because what they were using before wasn't working. Mm-hmm. So why? You said it yesterday, why continue to cut the ends of the roast off to fit in a pan when you don't have the same size pan? So
on that same tangent, and then you can go on, but I wanted to mention sometimes teachers get pushback from parents who never experienced anything like this. Mm-hmm. So they're looking at it as a completely foreign idea, and they don't necessarily understand all of the thought that you as a teacher learning our system have gone through. So I always encourage teachers or administrators, get the article on the website and give a copy, send it to all the parents in the school. They may or may not read it, but the ones that do, it'll give them a little bit better insight and understanding into why we do what we do.
Yep.
Well, I want to I know you have another question, but I want to piggyback on that. When I was in the classroom, probably my last year before I came here, I implemented a mastery-based approach to teaching social studies, which was really hard because I had to kind of remove myself from, the sage on the stage and I put it more on them to say, you know what, we're having unit 1, you got 3 weeks, here's your start, here's your finish. I'm going to come around kind of coaching and leading some discussions and so on. And the students pushed back initially, but I got more pushback from the parents and other teachers because now these students were being held to a standard they really haven't been held to. So they would fail an assignment and expect just to move on. And so I would get phone calls and from coaches and saying they need to play in the basketball game this weekend.
Oh, yeah.
And I had one who said, "Can you just pass him?" And so, but that kind of goes back to what Andrew was saying earlier of this kind of conveyor belt. It doesn't really matter what you get. It's, did you do the assignment? You got your grade. We're just going to move you. We're going to keep moving you until the end of the year. But now being a part of IEW and just seeing the beauty of slowing it down and really catering, I don't want to say catering, but really just meeting students where they're at. I mean, it's been a total game changer.
I will say that's one thing that the homeschool hybrid school that I worked at in California, it was great because it wasn't like a one-room schoolhouse, but we did have 5th and 6th were together, 7th and 8th were together. And I even taught in a math class where we had freshmen through seniors together. That was a little bit wild because, you had every age, every spectrum. You might have had one child that was a little bit more remedial, one that had a different path that they were going on. But it was nice because they were able to be with their peers, but learning at their own pace. And that's kind of what I love about this is you don't have to run right out the gate.
Right.
You can, you learn.
And belong. Yeah. If you
and
need
there's
to.
not that expectation either of you need to be here by May or June.
Exactly. So when we homeschooled our kids, we still did the standardized testing because I wanted to check that box and, I'm legit, I promise. But, don't arrest me. But I would tell my kids, I feel like standardized tests for us were judging a fish on its ability to climb a tree. Not every 8-year-old is going to know the same thing. And that doesn't mean that they're failing. They're at a different stage. And so thankfully they did well on all of our standardized tests. And I didn't get arrested for not teaching my children. But I've just always thought that to try to compare everybody just because they're the same age.
Okay, I have a question, actually. I think, Jennifer, this one's for you. And I love how it's introduced. If it's not too off topic.
We never go off topic.
Now we're curious.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are some modifications that still help students learn the concepts for students who are dyslexic or have other learning differences that impacts writing? You know, when you've got, learning differences mainstreamed into a classroom and you're teaching, do you have your learning difference students do Unit 1 while everybody else is doing Unit 3? What kind of modifications can you make?
Well, first off, I'll say in any respective classroom across the United States, you're going to have a student with a learning difference. The most common learning differences are that are diagnosed would be dyslexia and ADHD. And depending upon who you speak to or check, it ranges anywhere from 10 to 20%. So think about that for a minute, 10 to 20%. Of course, it occurs on a continuum. Some are much more stealthy in presentation than others. But one of the things that I did is anytime I go into a classroom, I assume I'm going to have those students. So the things that I would do and that I would encourage others to do as they're able is take time, especially comprehension is hard, vocabulary is hard because these students are not able to read at the same level as their peers. So when you're going through a source text together, it benefits all students to take time to break down that source text. Don't just assume that they know the vocabulary. Really take time to talk about those elements. Speak to them using Socratic dialogue, questioning, what do you think this means? What could this impact have? And then when you are working on the board, and I would say take a class keyword outline. There is nothing wrong with doing that. I have found it beneficial for my students that I know are diagnosed with it to not require that they write that keyword outline during class. I would take it and then I would capture it as a PDF. I would send it to them and then they would copy it at home because then they're not under the pressure of, do I try and get the artwork right of writing the letters? Because really that's kind of what it is sometimes. It's artwork. Or do I take my brain, which I only have so much available to use, and use that for really understanding and engaging with the content? So you've got to figure out what you're trying to focus on. But there is definite value in having them copy that when they get home because they're associating the letters with the words and the sounds. And it also helps build that and strengthen that comprehension. So do that. Also consider editing your checklist. That premium membership is wonderful for that. So I highly recommend that premium membership because you can alter the checklist to meet the student where their needs are. We have certain materials that are available. For example, some of our writing across the curriculum materials will have some simplified source texts that can be utilized if needed. We also have read the source text aloud, like I said, but also allow for scribing, voice dictation, having parents be allowed to scribe for their students as homework is really also beneficial. So,
anybody want to comment further on that, or shall we go on to the next question?
One thing that you said about copying, I know that I've worked with educators anytime, kind of going back to imitation, right? If you're copying something, that's not a good thing. You're wasting your time. And you have a whole article and talk about the benefits of copy work. And even with my 9th graders, I would encourage, I couldn't mandate it, but because we would have writers or students that would write incredibly slow, and teachers or students or parents would ask me, is there anything I can do? And really just the benefit of copy work is tremendous.
Yep.
And kind of just being there. So if they don't know how to spell a word, you can write it for them or put it on a whiteboard if you have one at home, or tell them how to spell it. And then that gives them the confidence.
right.
Whereas they may be afraid to write a word they don't know how to spell. And then they just dumb down their vocabulary to the
Right.
shortest, simplest word.
Yep.
One more thing on this subject of copying. I just came across this very recently. Perhaps some of you know the author Hunter Thompson. His stuff, a little edgy, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Drug Adventures, all that. So I'm not recommending his books, but I think it's very interesting. He was a successful writer, and he decided that he was going to type the book Farewell to Arms by Hemingway.
Wow.
He's just going to type it. And one of his friends said, why did you do that? And he goes, I just want to know what it feels like to write this well.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That's a
I
good
just want to
concept.
know what it feels like to have that level of artistic use of words flowing through my brain. And so even at a high level, you can learn a lot from copy.
Well, and I think Frederick Douglass, of course.
Memorizing all those speeches.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, please subscribe to our podcast in iTunes, Stitcher, or Spotify, or just visit us each week at iew.com/podcasts. Here you can also find show notes and relevant links from today's broadcast. One last thing, would you mind going to iTunes to rate and review our podcast? This really helps other smart, caring listeners like you find us. Thanks so much.